Deja vu. We're running the Zips episode again. Hey, maybe you maybe you caught the first one, but we're gonna try this again. Part two of our Zips projections live stream. Let's just get started on this episode of Deal the Cards. Well, if you're with us live for the first trial at this, my mic cut out multiple times, and then I went to leave the stream so that Andrew could keep going. And I clicked end stream, so that was poor.
Thanks.
But yeah, this episode of Deal on the Cards presented by 314 Sports Cards Collectibles. If you don't know me, I'm Josh. This is Andrew, Deal on the Cards podcast, and we're talking through the Cardinal Zips projections for 2024. So we'll quickly kind of go through what we talked about at the beginning. So if you're with us, sorry, we're going to rehash it again. Actually, maybe we do at the end for people who've already watched that. So we'll talk about the guys that we think they're low on. But yeah, we were talking through today the Zips projection system, which again comes out each year and projects where players are at 50th percentile outcomes, 80th percentile, 20th percentile. Thing about Zips that people really enjoy is that for the most part, yes, 2 streams in one night, Kareem. You guys are so lucky. Is they do a really good job for the most part of getting the 50th percentile outcomes pretty on spot on. Again, not for every player, but like for the average around the league, it's pretty good. And so that's why I think most people usually like Zips over other systems. But again, I think there's some things that we don't like with the Cardinals Zips projection system this year, or projections this year. There's some things we do like, and there is some things that we were surprised by. And so because we started with what we didn't like, the first time we did this, let's do it at the end for those of you who are watching live, so you don't have to repeat that. And you can check out the end if you want to, or listen to us talk about that again. But yeah, Andrew, let's talk through some of the guys that we thought the projections were pretty spot on for this year. One of the guys I think they did a really good job of this year was Brendan Donovan. They've got him almost 600 plate appearances, 280, 360, 408 slash line, 50% above league average for the 50th percentile outcome. Again, on his career, he's a 119 WRC plus guy. It's been trending downward each year slightly. His rookie year was his best year, 127. Can't remember what it was last year, and then or 2 years ago, and then it was like 112 this year, something like that. And so I haven't even looked at the comments yet, but it's kind of funny that people are calling it the reset. I'm on dial-up now. The internet was fine. It was just my mic is broken for some reason. But yeah, Brendan Donovan, I think that's a really fair projection to put him at like a 15% above league average guy. Again, this is the average outcomes here. I think 80th percentile outcomes, they have like a 133 OPS plus guy, and I love that because I do think Brendan Donovan, when he's firing all cylinders, is one of the best on base guys in all of baseball. Mixes in a little bit of power, has good bat to ball skills. So again, for an average season for Brendan Donovan, I think 15% above league average makes a ton of sense. That's actually, I think, the highest average OPS plus projection on the Cardinals this year, which I disagree with Will Contreras being lower than that for sure, but otherwise, I think that's pretty safe to say. So, how do you feel about Brendan Donovan's projection there?
Yeah, I feel like it's very fair. 115 OPS plus is like kind of around where he's been in the past. The slugging numbers aren't amazing, and that's not really what you're trying to get out of Brendan Donovan. I think like he's probably going to end up being one of the most solid offensive producers on this roster, and like he's not going to be the guy that you're batting like third every day, but he certainly is going to be like someone that you rely on at the top of the order to get on base, to set the table, hopefully, for some of these young power guys that are going to take the next step. And obviously we've talked about how we want to extend Brendan Donovan in the past, and this is kind of what we expect out of him every single season, and playing multiple positions and putting that projection up next season would be great. There's not a lot of guys that can play that many positions and like play at such a good level offensively. I think the closest was Chris Taylor, who is horrible and like one of the worst hitters in all of baseball. But he was like fine for a couple of years, and like I think you put out the tweet where he has like an 80 something WRC plus. And everyone wants Brendan Donovan. He seems like a guy that people are going after in a lot of these things, and in a lot of these like proposed trade packages from other fan bases. And I really like the projection. I think that's spot on, and he probably has like the closest like range of outcomes where he's probably not going to be like a 130 WRC plus guy, but he's also not really going to be like a 90 WRC plus guy. You know, like I think Donovan's definitely going to be a guy that's very steady throughout his career and just going to put up similar numbers like that all the time.
Yeah, I the one part of the projection that I think is pretty low to me is that they have him at well, I mean, if he's that WRC plus, he's probably about a 3-win player, but or less than a 3-win, or yeah, about 3-win, but they have a 2.5-win player. I would put him in the 3.5 win player range, and so that was a little low to me. There's some questions in here about like what we think is maybe stopping the extension, like if that's Bloom, and I don't know honestly. And if it is Bloom, I'm like, dude, I strongly disagree with you there. We've been giving you a lot of praise, but I would anyone who's against a Brendan Donovan extension right now, I just don't agree with at all. I actually have another story going out on him today, kind of in response to that tweet I put out today, because I think sometimes Brendan Donovan as a hitter gets penalized for the fact that he doesn't play one position, which is really weird. But I think it's because like you don't hear people say, "Oh, Brendan Donovan's one of the best second basemen in baseball," because well, he's not a second baseman. He's also a third baseman and a left fielder and a right fielder and a first baseman. And so, but like if you like this year, I think the Shredder had him as like the sixth best second baseman in baseball. Since he entered the league, he's the fourth best WRC plus of all second basemen. So I think if Brendan Donovan was a second baseman, people would be like, "Oh, he's one of the best second basemen in baseball." If he was a third baseman, he is the ninth best WRC plus since he came in 2022. And guess who he's tied with? Or actually, I think 1 point better than Nolan Arenado, who had
Oh,
an
no.
MVP season in 2022. Um, and then, like, I think a left fielder and right fielders, he'd be the 11th or 12th best in terms of WRC plus. So his bat plays. Like, I hear people say, like, the pessimists about Donovan be like, "Oh, if this was a good team, you wouldn't even be a starter, or he'd bat like 8th or 9th." And it's like, what are you talking about? He's 51st in baseball since he entered the league in WRC plus, which puts him in the top 22% of hitters. Like, stop with the Brendan Donovan hate. I don't get it. So, yeah, Brendan Donovan's the definition of glue guy. I like what you said, that I think he's the guy that I'm most confident in hits the 50 percentile projection. But again, we did see in 2022 his rookie year a 127 WRC plus year. So I think there are heights that he hasn't gotten back to yet. Last year was actually kind of a down year for him offensively. 2023, we saw the really rough start to the year, and then he was red hot in the summer. He's like a 147 WRC plus guy. And then he ended up being put on a 60-day IL with the season-ending elbow surgery. But he was going to hit the rest of the year, and he was hitting even when his elbow was hurt. And then kind of had a little bit of some slumps in 2024, but was still a good player. So I'm actually expecting Brendan Donovan to get back to more of that 118, 120, 122 WRC plus range. But I really like this projection for him. Speaking of another lefty bat that debuted, well, he debuted in 2021, but really got his foothold in was 2022. Lars Nootbaar, he's another guy that I really like the projection of. They had him at a 116 WRC plus this year, 244, 344, 432 slash line, 2.3 WAR player. He was also a guy that with his 80th percentile projection, they had him at almost a 140 OPS plus and his 80th percentile, which I think makes a lot of sense because he draws a crap ton of walks. He does not swing at pitches out of the zone. He hits the balls that do go in the zone really well, and he hits it hard. And he will hit it far if he does it more consistently. So they have him, if he plays gets 475 at bats, 80th percentile projection there. He's almost a 140 WRC plus guy or OPS plus guy, a 4-win player. Actually, only a 3.4 win player in that scenario, which seems really weird to me because if Lars Nootbaar is one of the best hitters in baseball and a above average left fielder, you would think he's like a 5-win player. But yeah, I really liked the Lars Nootbaar neutral projection there. And then I think the positive is really good. And then on the low end for Donovan and Nootbaar, they had him as basically slightly below the average hitter. So I think in a worst case scenario, that's what you get from those two guys is that's league average or slightly worse, but you expect them to be about 10, 15% above league average with the ability to go 20, 30% if things go well.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly what the graphic was. It was like a Seiya Suzuki post, even though Lars Nootbaar was. And I was like, why are we looking like I don't know. I don't get it. Seiya Suzuki won't even start over Lars Nootbaar on the national team. Sorry, because Lars Nootbaar can catch the ball, but he like hits the ball extremely hard, and I think his like it was either the lowest whiff rate or the lowest chase rate in all of baseball. which is
It was
either
90th
one.
percentile chase rate and exit velocity, I think, or something.
But
Or
like one of them
cardio
was
percent or
100th
something like that.
percentile, which means he's the best
Yeah,
in.
it's 100 percentile chase percentage.
Yeah, so he doesn't chase at all. He draws a lot of walks, hits the ball extremely hard, and we've seen a lot of bad luck with some of the Lars Nootbaar metrics. If he stays healthy through a full 162, which I think Zips is baking in a little bit that he won't, because he does have like fewer plate appearances than some of the other guys in the 50th percentile projection, which I think is totally fair. 475 plate appearances, that's not necessarily a full season. So like I could totally see him going on the IL for a small stint of the season, and that's just kind of what you get with Lars Nootbaar. But he's not really Tyler O'Neill, where he's like, those are two different situations. Like we've talked about that so much on here that like we don't even need to talk about it anymore. But I think like Lars Nootbaar just frustrates me, because there's all these people that are like, oh, he's overrated and he's not that good. And like those people haven't looked at the metrics. They haven't looked at the monthly splits when he's healthy and when he's not. And they just, I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe it's because there's all this hype around him and he's going to recruit all his Japanese teammates to the Cardinals, and then he recruits them for another team that he grew up watching. So I don't know what it is with Lars Nootbaar that people seem to not like him. But if he has, and this will not be like, are we even doing bold predictions this year? Is that even a good idea to revisit that for the third time?
Of course it is.
I just won't do that on a day where I'm not, or I'm busy or something, because every year I pick Lars Nootbaar to make the All-Star team. So I'm like, if he has a healthy first half, that's all he needs to like be a left field All-Star, because there's just not that many good left fielders in baseball or in the National League, where I think he could be one of the top players at that position. If he's healthy, that will not be one of my bold predictions this year, even if we do that episode, because I can't do that again. I can't say that Lars Nootbaar is going to be an all-star and then he goes on the IL on like day 3 of the season. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess not. That's all he has to do. Stay healthy. He hits the ball hard. He'll break out. He could be a 25 homer guy. I'm not going to say 30 because someone will clip that. But
30 would be insane for Newt. But here's the thing. Like I get. I mean, even though I think we should be in an age where we understand that these advanced metrics and predictive metrics and underlying metrics all, like, again, it doesn't mean you're for sure going to be good, but when you have so many of the indicators of someone that's going to break out as a star, like, you want to keep that kind of profile player around you. You want to keep running that guy out there to see if it figures out. But again, even for those people who are like, oh, Nootbaar is just the red bubbles guy, he's just the baseball savant nerds guy. It's like, okay, let's look at the counting stats, because I get he hasn't played full seasons because of injuries. But when he's on the field, 2022, 123 WRC plus, 2023, 118, 2024, 114. For his career, he's 16% above league average. I don't get how people say he's mediocre or scrub or fourth or fifth outfielder at best, when he's on his career 16% better than the league average hitter. That's not a fourth or fifth outfielder when you play average defense. That's a starting caliber outfield in this league, one of the better ones. He's not an all-star. He's not a star. But when you pair that and again, lack of availability, and we've seen that when he's on the field consistently, he tends to produce even better. You put that on the field consistently, if he can be healthy and the injuries aren't like he keeps straining his hamstring or twisting his ankle or oblique stuff. It's these weird injuries that, again, he has to prove he can avoid, but they are ones that it's like, it's not things that you just think in his profile he's just going to keep breaking his hand or keep breaking ribs. Like, those are things you can avoid if you play smarter. And that's why, I agree with you in terms of, I don't get why people just want to throw Nootbaar out. I think it's probably because people got so hyped on him. You're listening on audio. Andrew just made fun of my mic situation with the Valentine's Day card. So that's a gift to the YouTube community there. Great. Anyways, moving on from Newt. The last one I think was pretty good for a 50% shot projection was Sonny Gray. They have him at a 3.43 ERA this year in 26 games, 150 innings, 156 strikeouts. think is like a 125, 120 ERA plus. They have his strikeouts per nine going down a little bit this year. His walk percentage being okay. His home run rate dips a big time for them, which I think is a good thing. 3-win player. Again, for 50th percentile projections, I think that's really fair for Sonny Gray. They have him in his 80th percentile projection this year is a 2.86 ERA. 20th percentile projection is a 4.09. I agree with the 20th. I think in the worst case scenario, you're looking at a 4 ERA guy with Gray, but again, that's worst case scenario. I actually think 80th percentile, I'd go more in the 2.6 range with maybe that's 90th percentile. 2.86 is pretty good. The strikeout rate, I wish they would put 80th percentile. I think that they're a little low on that for him this year. But I think Sonny Gray's projection is really good. Also, speaking to Trevor's, because I moved on from the Nootbaar point, I think we need to talk more about him in center field because it would make a lot of sense, especially when Victor Scott and Michael Ciani aren't running away with it.
Yeah.
And it creates more opportunities for other young guys. So go read that article I put out yesterday. But
I mean,
what do you think about Sonny Gray?
I mean, we can talk about the Nootbaar point first if you want.
Oh, yeah,
but
go for it.
For Sonny Gray, I guess we'll talk about Nootbaar. Yeah. If you're going to keep Arenado, it's nonsensical to keep Nootbaar out of center field because at that point you're going to take at bats away from a Donovan, a Gorman, or a Burleson.
Yep.
And you just can't do that, right? And I'm all in favor of keeping Arenado, seeing what he can do, hoping he bounces back. And one of two things happens, right? Number one, the Cardinals are who we thought they were. They don't make the playoffs. And then, but if Arenado plays well, he plays himself right into a trade. And if one of these big teams in the postseason loses a third baseman, which, I mean, I think Max Muncy had some injury problems last year, if I recall, then he gets to live out his dream and go play for the Dodgers, just like every other player in the league wants to do, right? And that's totally fine. And they'll probably pay more for Arenado, especially if he's playing well. Probably make the Cardinals eat less of his salary. And at this point, unless Bregman signs tomorrow and not with the Red Sox, and the Red Sox are like, oh, okay, we'll pivot to Arenado and pay a little bit for him. Like I see him on the roster, and like Lars Nootbaar being in center field, you're not really taking away playing time for anybody who's going to have a meaningful future, unless Victor Scott has a great spring and shows that he's ready for the big leagues. Like, I don't care if Michael Ciani plays or not. It does not matter to me because he's not a part of this team's long-term future. Like, we see what Michael Ciani is when he's at his best. He's like an 80 OPS plus guy who's a platinum glover. That's great, right? But like the hitting with Ciani is just so bad that like it can't really justify like even having his glove on the starting lineup, and like he can be a late inning defensive sub, and that's great. And yeah, Kareem 80 is a stretch, but like he did have an 80 like OPS plus, WRC plus, whatever, before he got hurt. So like,
yeah, but that was over a stretch, a 3-month stretch where his BABIP was over 400.
Yeah, exactly. So
like
he got extremely lucky during that stretch. That's probably the best it's ever going to be. So I'm sorry, I don't care if he gets playing time. Sorry, Ollie. I know you think he's a great player or whatever you said at winter warm-up. I love Ollie. Sometimes he has bad takes. All right. Yeah. And we can disagree with our managers, and that's fine. That doesn't mean they should be fired. It's a different story. But like Nootbaar being in center field just elevates the lineup. Now you don't have assuming Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker live up to like even half of what we think they can be, you're not going to have any like bats in this lineup that are like really that bad. Like every bat in this lineup will be solid. And
yeah,
like that would be so much better than just like benching Burleson every other day and starting Ciani in center field and being like, what are we doing? We have a black hole at the bottom. And it gives Walker and Gorman more room to struggle too, because every lineup, even the Dodgers, well, Hai-Song Kim isn't that great of a hitter. I'll say it now, but you know what?
But to your point, like if you have
even these like juggernaut teams will have guys at the bottom of their order that are like not names, right? And that's totally fine.
But like if you start, like let's say, because there's a real world where Pedro Pages and Michael Ciani are the primary center field and catcher options this year. And it's like, how much more pressure does that put on your lineup when Walker has to produce as your 6 or 7 hole hitter? Because Hayes and Siani, your 8-9 guys, and you know that they're probably 20 to 30% below league average. You hope more, but like it's not necessarily that. And if you replace those guys with Ivan Herrera, who should be 10%, 15%, and then showed last year to be 20% above league average, and then again, like Alec Burleson in the lineup, because again, Alec Burleson's not playing center, but if you move Newt to the center and you have Arenado still, you put Donovan in left and Burleson can DH at that point. That's a lot stronger of a lineup. I have a way too early opening day roster projection going out, and I think in one of them I have Walker batting ninth in one of my lineups because like if that's if Nootbaar's in center field because like especially against righties like you have a ton of lefties that can hit, and if Nolan Gorman's not hitting he can bat ninth. Like I'd rather have that scenario than it's like okay Gorm's my 6-hole hitter, if he's not hitting then it's like a black hole, it's the 6th spot, and then the 8-9 guys aren't hitting either, and you really don't have Melissa Contreras is the one like center piece bat you have and a bunch of good bats around him. I just think to your point, it's like having as many good bats in lineup as possible takes the pressure off the other guys. So totally agree with that. But what's your thoughts on Sonny Gray in like that projection?
Yeah, I think Sonny Gray had a really weird season in 2024. And like I was talking to one of my friends who's a developer at MLB The Show. And I'll tie this into Sonny Gray really quickly. But like they have Ryan Helsley as like a silver grade player, and they have Sonny Gray as a diamond grade player. And I was like, Sonny Gray didn't have that great of a season last year. Why is he a diamond grade player? Why is Ryan Helsley a silver grade player? And a lot of the metrics they take into account are some like the expected numbers and a lot of strikeout numbers. And the reason Sonny Gray was a diamond grade player is because his expected numbers were great and he had an all-time high strikeout rate for his career. And like if you like, I guess they're the guys over there at the game studios are taking a look at some of these like batted ball data and like all that stuff, which is really cool that I got that piece of information from them. I don't even know if I'm allowed to share that. Sorry. But like the strikeout percentage was really good last year, and he had just an unsustainably high fly ball to home run ratio, which like it just isn't sustainable. And he had an unsustainably low fly ball to home run ratio back in 2023 when he finished second in Cy Young voting. So it did even out, but like I could totally see just him getting back to his career norms, maybe not being a Cy Young finalist like he was in 2023, but being like just a really solid pitcher and like being someone that can anchor this young, well, this rotation, not young rotation. Thanks, Mo, for not. Anyway,
Oh man,
frustrating. But if he's what the projection says he is, which I think is very fair, like what is it?
I'm
looking at advanced metrics.
3.43.
3.49 FIP feels high for Sonny Gray because I feel like
It
even
does.
last year
It was a
FIP
2 something,
was
or it was
low.
at low threes.
It was low. 3.43 ERA. I feel like is in line. The Ks per nine is a little bit. Well, actually, no. The Ks per nine seems about fine, and all of that. So like those numbers will give you exactly what I think Sonny Gray would be. And yeah, Trevor, I'm surprised they have a diamond in the show. Well, they should have had Ryan Helsley as their diamond in the show because they have like random relievers that are diamonds. But Sonny Gray, I do not expect to be up there.
Yeah. Well, I do think, I think we're in agreement. The Sonny Gray 50% projection makes sense. Just some quarrels with it. Could be a little bit better in some areas, but overall, pretty good. I don't think there's ever going to be a projection. Anyone's like, I love every part of the projection, but overall, I think Sonny Gray's is pretty good. I want to move to a category.
Michaelis' projection. I didn't even look at it. Is he? Where is he? Oh,
It's actually not terrible.
It's not terrible.
4.63.
I don't like that.
So okay, but here's the category we want to move into is guys that we were shocked by, and what I'm in a good way, and by mean like means is I don't think we would have predicted that they would be this good type guys. And actually, one of them, to be fair, I'll start with the guy who's the least crazy, Michael McGreevy. I was just pleasantly surprised that with his profile, they had him as a sub-4 ERA guy next year. They have him making 27 starts at a 3.99 ERA, covering 150 innings. If you told me that's what you're getting from Michael McGreevy this year, sign me up. Like, first full season as a starter, sub-4 ERA, 150 innings. Like, I don't think we understand how valuable that would be for the Cardinals this year. I'm not saying that's like an ace pitcher by any means, but how often do the Cardinals have not had guys that can put into their rotation that they've developed that can give him that kind of stuff. They go out and pay $15 million a year for Kyle Gibson to give him that stuff. It's so nice to think that they could have some guys that even just slot in as a fifth or fourth starter next year and give you that kind of production. And Michael McGreevy's 80th percentile projection was really interesting to me. They had him in the 80th percentile as a 2.9 win player, or with a 3.56 ERA, and even his 20th percentile is a 4.5 ERA. Like if Michael McGreevy gave you 30 starts or 28 starts next year this coming year at a 4.5 ERA, I would love it, but it's not the worst thing ever because that's what freaking Miles Michaelis is giving you, and you're paying him $16 million. Like Miles Michaelis gave you worse last year. So yeah, if McGreevy has a sub-3 or sub-4 ERA next year, sign me up.
I think this projection is inaccurate because it has him starting 27 games, and I don't think he's going to get to start 27 games because. No, I know. I'm just kidding.
They try to project the season out as much as they can.
I know,
but I get what you mean.
Can we start Michael McGreevy? Can we just like say that he's in the rotation? Can Mo, like on the first day of spring training, just go to all the reporters when he has that little press conference with them and be like, "Yeah, Michael McGreevy's in the rotation," and not Eric Fetty, or maybe Eric Fetty, Steven Matz and Miles Michaelis and whoever else have to compete for a role in the rotation this spring. Can you just say that? Like,
I do think if McGreevy has a good spring, they will put him in the rotation. I think if
who's
they
out of the rotation?
Steven Matz, they have done it before. They're not afraid to move him to the bullpen. And Mo, even at winter warmup, was like, historically, we have a few guys who don't go pole to pole. And guess what?
Yeah, but if he's healthy, you can't tell me that if he's healthy, this organization is not going to be like, we're paying him $12 million this year. He has to start.
I think Miles Michaelis is different. I think Steven Matz, they've already every single year Steven Matz has been in St. Louis, they put him in the bullpen at some point. I don't think they'd be afraid.
Yeah, but they let him start out of camp.
Yes, but they didn't have a young. They didn't really have a young starter that could do that, and also this is the fourth year of it. Like I think Matz. I mean, again, they could prove me wrong in the worst way. I think Michaelis they won't, but with Steven Matz, I do.
When people call on Matz and just get rid of him.
I guess okay. I'm not defending it, but I see why they're keeping him, because if McGreevy and Quinn Matthews and all these guys aren't ready out of camp, then you slide Matz into the rotation. But he gives you the flexibility that Matz can be in the bullpen if he's not producing for you. So
do you think you're going to spring training trade?
No, unless it's Nato, but I don't think it's happening.
Yeah.
I don't
think
what an offseason.
I don't think Miles Michaelis should be DFA'd like immediately. I think he should need to have a good spring. But if he has a decent spring, I don't mind him being in the rotation, because there are ways to move around it where Michaelis can stay in the rotation and McGreevy can also start, and you get prospects back for Eric Fetty or Steven Matz or something reasonable. Like Miles Michaelis, you just DFA him, you offload that money. I don't think we're expecting this team to be really good this year. So I think it's okay to give him those starts when you've paid $19 million or however much. I was convinced it was $20 million, but maybe I got that.
It's 16. I think it or 17. If they're fine with him giving him starts, but if he's bad, then you need to move him out of the rotation if there's a guy ready. But if he's not, I mean, you can, in theory, could move him at the deadline for something, and also it gives you depth. But again, get rid of him.
I'm not in favor of launching him to Mars or like Kareem says, or just getting rid of him immediately. He does eat innings. Sandy is to some extent correct. He has a little bit of value, not $16 million worth of value, maybe league minimum worth of value, but I would start him in the rotation. And if it gets really bad, then give him the Waino treatment, let him get to 200 wins. No, I'm kidding.
No, I just think you start him in the rotation. But if in camp, there's other guys who've proven they need to be in the rotation, then I'm giving them the rotation spot over Michaelis.
Or just Fantino.
Yeah. But anyways, the other guy that's kind of in a similar spot as Michael McGreevy that I was shocked by. Andrew, could you believe that DrewRom.com was projected to have a sub-4 ERA in 17 starts? They have Drew Rom as a 3.98 ERA guy. That's crazy. I was like, what?
Yeah. Josh, I think we need to do some ad reads in a second, but I've seen DrewRom.com autographs at 314 Sports Cards for $2. Maybe I should buy all of them.
Before we get into DrewRom.com, then we want to thank DrewRom.com is Drew Rom. If you guys forgot, Drew Rom exists because he wasn't there last year, really. But 314 is located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet. They're open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday, 9 to 4 on Saturdays. They buy, sell, and trade all sports cards and Pokemon cards, and have the newest selections of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars around the league. You can check out Mason Win cards there. You can check out all the cards you want through 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles. Make sure you go check them out. We know many of you already shop there. They've been so great to us, and we just really appreciate them. And Andrew, you deserve like a punch card there at this point. You're there so often, so I need to get down there again sometime soon. But we also want to thank our partners over at Underdog Fantasy Sports. They're our favorite place to play fantasy games. You can now play in Missouri, Illinois, and a lot of the places around. I believe all the states around here, but you'd have to check on that. But you got to check out Pick'em. It's an easy way to play. You just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they go higher or lower. You can win 20 times your money by going 5 for 5, or there's varying percentages based on if you go pick more or less players. If that sounds like fun, sign up with the promo code CARDS, which is on the screen. You click the link in our bio to download the app, and you get a first free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries. So, DrewRom.com, same argument as Michael McGreevy. If somehow DrewRom.com, actually this plays into Kareem's point. If you could guarantee me right now that Drew Rom could get you at least sub-4 ERA and 17 starts next year, then you 1,000% should be trading 2 of your veteran starters away because you have depth. Like Drew Rom could be a 5-starter for you. You don't need those veterans to hold the spots for you. If Quinn Matthews and McGreevy and Tink and all these guys aren't ready, you throw Drew Rom out there and he's going to be a 5-starter for you. So again, I'm not trying to hype up Drew Rom, but the point is going into 2026, like if Drew Rom is a guy that you could be like, hey, if we need 15 starts out of them, sub-4 ERA guy, or even like around 4 ERA guy, that's really helpful depth to have. That's something nice to bank on, that if you have a rotation injury in May, then you can put a guy like Drew Rom in there and he'll get you through the month. So I was very surprised by that. Did you forget that he was a Cardinal?
No, I knew he was there. I remember him being at winter warm-up. Wasn't he one of like the first interviews we had at winter warm-up? Or am I?
Yes.
Am I wrong about that? I remember he's on the team from time to time. Yeah, I don't know. Drew Rom is Drew Rom. Like he got put on waivers and no one wanted him, and he's back. He got outrighted to AAA. So that would be a pretty embarrassing miss on all 29 other teams if he ends up being good. Oh, Jacob Bosikovic is on the projection. What do they have projected at? Anyway, I'm getting distracted by two-way.
Just because we're going long, like one random guy, another guy. Just we don't need to spend too much time on it. But I would say Takeo Roby is actually someone that I was kind of pleasantly surprised by. They had him at a 4.48 ERA if he had to make 16 starts this year. I'm going to put the under at 1 start this year. I don't think he makes a single start for St. Louis this year. But I mean, if he plays really well, he might make him put himself in the mix. It's just encouraging that so far they've looked at his profile and they think even now at a point when he's not considered MLB ready, that they think he could be like, well, that'd be a bad MLB, like not a great MLB starter, but it's something. So I think he's really interesting, and I just think Takeo Roby's a guy where clearly Quinn Matthews, Tink Hence, and Cooper Jerpy are the 3 best pitching prospects in the system right now. But Takeo Roby's that 4th most talented guy, really, especially in that group. And he's a guy that when he's healthy and when he's pitched well, he looks like a top 100 prospect type. So Takeo Roby's a lot of variance there, a lot of injuries, but again, I like the projection there. It was optimistic in a good way.
Yeah, they have Kyle Leahy projected to make 6 starts, and now I'm happy that Sandy's not here because we'd be talking about that for the next 15 months.
I think they always project a reliever to make a start. Like I think it's like there's very rare. Like they have some like John King's projected a start in there. It's just the projections are weird, but
okay. Miles Michaelis attitude also, Kareem. Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Checkbook baseball. Once you said that, I was like, come on, guys. Like, why is he still here? He's the embodiment of Cardinals checkbook baseball, right? Like,
That's true. It's funny when he's coming from one of the guys who makes the most money on the team.
Yeah,
but,
it's terrible.
Let's look at the guys that we did not like the projections on. So again, some of you have already listened to part of this, so we're repeating some of it. But I'll start with the guy that we didn't talk about last time, and then we can talk about the other 3 and finish maybe with Jordan Walker since we started that last time. But a random one I didn't like is Cooper Jerpy. They had him like as like a 5.5 ERA guy if he were to pitch this year. And I think there's a world that the Cardinals won't actually do it, but I think there's a world this year where he is awesome in spring training. I think Cooper Jerpy's awesome. You talk to guys that are really in the know of Cardinals prospects, and you'll see soon. There's some people that are really high on Cooper Jerpy. I think Keith Law, from Kareem just shared with us today, Cooper Jerpy was just outside his top 100 prospects.
Keith Law is my guy. With the manager of the year voting, he's my guy. I know he's not a popular with Cardinal fans. So
we're not just saying that because he was just on the podcast. I promise you that, because we've been high. I've been a big Cooper Jerpy guy for a while. I know Kareem has. I know, like, talk to Kyle Reese, talk to Brian Walton. You talk to pretty much anyone who's prospect gurus. Like, Cooper Jerpy has a lot to like about his profile, and he's an advanced. I think he's a 4-year starter at Oregon State. He's been drafted a couple years ago. He's he's like 24, I think. So he's not young. He's 24, so he's not like a 20-year-old. I think he's a guy that out of the bullpen this year could be a factor. So yeah, I just didn't like that projection. But should we start with the one I was the most annoyed by and repeat that one? The good old new first baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Go for it.
Okay. Again, sorry if you already heard of this, but if you haven't, because you're listening later, the guy that I think is the dumbest projection on here is Willson Contreras. This is the third straight year now they have him at a 112 or a 113 or OPS plus projection from Zips, and each of the last 3 years he's been in the 120s or 130s or 140s. So they continue to project him to be like a 10% above league average bat. And every year he ends up being 20 or 30% or 40% above league average. He's now moving from being a primary catcher to a primary first baseman who DHs sometimes. That's less mileage on his legs. I understand he's going to be 33 middle of next year, so he could regress a little bit. I'm not saying that he's for sure going to be a 140 WRC plus guy or even 130, but to say it is 50 percentile outcome of 113, I think is massively underrating him. I don't understand why Zips doesn't like him. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, they've done this in the past. There's probably some combination of formulas that they use with some of the underlying metrics that they just don't like, and they'll get projections wrong from time to time. But I mean, they're not projecting him to be like a bad hitter. I think he would be a better hitter than I think it's a little bit odd that they have Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar as better hitters than Contreras. I can totally see why with some of the age-related stuff. Like, he's turning 33 this season, and we've seen some of the Cardinals players, like, once they age a little bit, like, they're not necessarily as good. And like Goldie was an MVP and then fell off the next year, right? Like, so these things can happen. And Contreras is younger than Goldie, obviously, but
yeah,
Arenado had similar regression from 2022 to 2023, and I think there deserves to be a whole case study on what happened in 2022 and why it ever.
But real quick at that, Paul Goldschmidt last year was 36. Yeah. Willson Contreras is 32. Yep. Nolan, to be fair, was 32 last year, but you saw in his age 31 season signs of regression. Willson Contreras last year, you've seen signs of ascension. Like, he just keeps getting better. So to project him like ascending to a 140 WRC plus guy, and it's not like there's things really a lot in his profile that's like, oh, that's unsustainable. And to just say continue to project him to be that low again. Like, the fact that I love Nootbaar and I love Donovan, we'll talk about him in a second, but that they project him, or we already talked about them, but they project him to be a worse hitter than them, I think is crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a miss. I would project him a little bit higher, but I could those numbers are perfectly respectable. Maybe not at first base, like they're not going to be like a top first baseman in the league, but he was ranked like by I hate MLB Network and their projections, but like he was ranked above Pete Alonso on that, and I could totally see that being the thing, which he should be, because Pete Alonso is not really that good, honestly. Like, Willson Contreras would not get taken down.
But somehow Willson Contreras' contract is really bad, according to Buster Olney and Cubs fans, because he's playing first base now.
Well, that's just because Cubs Twitter is not very smart. But
well, even some Cardinal fans are like, "What a bust of a contract from Mo," and I'm like, how they handled him, not been great, but Willson Contreras has continued to be awesome regardless.
Yeah, it's kind of their own fault, like that they moved him off catcher the first time. This time, I think, is totally understandable. And I didn't think he was going to catch the entirety of his contract. Maybe he's moving off catcher a little bit earlier than I thought, but
Honestly, I think moving him to first base is the single best decision they've made all offseason. I'll stand by that. The best thing they've done.
It's the single decision they've made all offseason. Like,
okay, that's fair. Even if they had traded okay, fine. Even if they traded Nato, traded Fetty, traded Helsley, moving Wilson Contreras first base is the single best thing they could have done because it maximizes who he is. He is a hitter. And even as a catcher, you're not going to get 150 games out of him. You're maybe going to get 120 with some DH spots. Get him in lineup every single day. You want that bat in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zips, like their projections are conservative though, and that's totally understandable. Like I'm not as upset about it as you because it's not like they project him to be a bad hitter next year. Like the 237 batting average is probably the one red flag that I'm just like, why do you think he's gonna hit like under 250? Like I don't see that necessarily, but also I don't care about batting average. It's not important unless my favorite player is vying for the Triple Crown and he loses to Luis Ariz, but that's a different story. That for another time.
There's always a Shohei Ohtani comment in here.
Yeah,
okay, so then
I was talking about Mason Wynn.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's sandwich the two. The one that I don't think is as egregious as two of the guys. So Wilson Contreras, I think, is terrible projection. Just gonna be honest. The second one that I don't think is terrible, but I think is a little bit lower than I'd like. So I think they're low on him is Mason Wynn. They have him projected 253 batting average, 307 on base percentage, 392 slug, 94 W or OPS plus, so 6% below league average after he was like 3 or 4% above league average last year. Again, there's a lot of things about his profile that people thought, hey, there's some regression coming, but man, I'd have to go back. I think it was like May or June last year when that conversation was starting, and someone had a really good piece kind of comparing Wynn's batted profile to some other guys that like find success like him, and that he has some traits about him that seem that he can overcome some of the like expected regression that comes. But then also he added power in the second half. So I'm not here to tell you Mason Wynn's even going to be 15% above league average next year. I just think for a 50th percentile outcome, 95 is the very lowest that I was okay with, but I think it's low. I think projecting him more of like a 100 to 105 next year makes more sense. They have him as the second most valuable Cardinal next year behind Nolan Arenado. I think he'll end up probably being the most valuable Cardinal. Actually, he's probably the safest one. Lars Nootbaar could be the most valuable. Brendan Donovan, Wilson Contreras. But Mason Wynn with the defense obviously is going to be a very valuable player. I just think they're a little low in his bat.
Yeah, I think the 94 is like what we thought he would be last year at like top outcome. He ended up being a lot better than that. But like just the eye test will show you that like a lot of the hits that he had, especially earlier on the season when he was like all-star potential were a little bit fluky. Like some stuff would just drop and be like, oh, that's another like little bloop single by Mason Wynn. But like some hitters are like that, right? There's guys that don't hit the ball very hard and get a lot of hits. And he could end up being one of those guys. And if we see more from the speed, like that would be extremely valuable. Like Luis Ariz is like the guy we just talked about. He's a slap hitter, but he has no speed and no athleticism. So like hitting singles is not as valuable when there's not a threat to steal second base, which he did mention that he was working on that. And I'm excited to see more of what he can do on the base pass. He does have the speed tool. He just has to get better at stealing. But yeah, I mean, like with the defense, which he's improved, he's hoping to make less errors this season. Definitely working on some of those like shortstop drills. I totally see him being one of the more like projectable, like most valuable players on the team. And I just had a thought come into my head, which is that even if they punt on the season, if they keep Nolan Arenado until opening day, they can say that they've had a Hall of Famer in uniform every single day or every single season since 1904 or whatever they usually say. Because that was on my mind when Max Scherzer signed with the Blue Jays this afternoon. I was like, oh, now that he's off the board, they have to keep Arenado at least till opening day. So
yeah, it's also 15.5 million. I was like, not bad. Bring fans in. Anyways, whatever. I would rather see the unarms, but it's fine. Last guy, but this is another one that I think is a major underrating is Ivan Herrera. They projected him as a 251 batting average, 342 on base, 382 slug, a 103 OPS plus. This is after he was a 127 OPS plus last year. in 80 games or something like that. I just think that's really low in Yvonne. I don't think they need to say 50 percentile. He's a 127 guy next year, but like as a 110, 112, 115, I think he should like Alec Burleson's a 110 as his 50th percentile. I think Yvonne Herrera should be that. Alec Burleson obviously is extremely good against right-handed pitching, struggles mightily against left-handed pitching. Yvonne Herrera hits both. He was over 300 batting average last year. They have him regressing 50 points there. Again, he had a really high BABIP last year, so some regression across the board I can see happening because he's not a fast guy necessarily, but I was really surprised by that one. I don't know why they're so low on the Cardinal catchers each year. It seems like, I guess, because they still have Wilson as a catcher on here. But yeah, Yvonne, I would say his 50th percentile should be at least 10 points higher with the 80th percentile projections, which they have Yvonne's 80th percentile projection as, let's see here, a 124 WRC plus guy, which is just kind of weird because we just saw like he's played 70, 80 games. He's probably got 30 more games that he can play in a full season, 40 because of the catching DHing. And he was better than that. So to me, it's a little weird that they're so low on him. I don't totally understand why, especially when he's a high expected WOBA guy and WOBA guy too. So that's takes into account like batted ball data, and I don't know. It's just weird. So I don't know. How did you feel about Yvonne's?
I feel like it was lower than I thought it would be, but I think it's a little bit fair considering like just hasn't gotten a chance to play. And like that's what mainly frustrates me about Ivan Herrera is that we don't really know what he is. We know he has a higher ceiling than Pages. And like I just want to see him play because I feel like he would like if the organization's lost in a lot of other ways, but if the organization thinks Pages is the catcher of the future and not Herrera, and they are for whatever reason not trading Herrera, then they're lost, right? Like that doesn't make any sense to me. They just need to run him out there and see what he's got. And like for a catcher to put up those numbers, that's still pretty good. And you're really just expecting Herrera to be a role player. He's not going to be batting third or fourth for you, probably batting sixth at best. Even if he does hit those outcomes. And if he's like, I mean, he could bat third or fourth for you if some of these other guys like Gorman or Nootbaar gets hurt and Walker doesn't pan out. But that's not the makings of a good team, right? Like for this team to be truly successful, he's going to end up batting like sixth, and hopefully he's working on that arm and he's going to be throwing out runners. But Pages didn't really have that much of a better like caught stealing rate. I think just pitchers were more comfortable pitching to him, and like at a certain point, you're just gonna be like, sorry, Miles, like you don't get to pitch to Pedro Pages because you're gonna give up 3 home runs in this inning, no matter what, right? Like because you're just not very good, and that's fine. I don't put too much stock in these projections for like breakout candidates like Herrera because they're always just going to be lower. And I was nice to see he was on some list. Maybe it was MLB Network. I don't like giving them credit because they're just like their rankings and projection systems are just horrible. But they did have him, I think, on a breakout list, and I was like, that's cool to see. I don't know if he's going to actually get the opportunity to break out because it seems like maybe it's just because Pages was at winter warm up that everyone was like singing his praises and whatever, and we didn't get to hear from Herrera at that event. But like you just need to play him every day and see what he's got.
Yeah, I guess to your like the 50 percentile outcomes, they can kind of project a little bit of a step forward or a breakout because if their 50 percentile is decently high, then that puts their 80th percentile even higher. But even like again, even Yvonne's 80th percentile projections of 124, which I think is a little bit low for like a best outcome for him. So anyways, I just think they're low on him. But I think across the board, which is really interesting, here's the 80th percentile projections of Cardinal hitters: 127 for Arenado, 113 for Wynn, 131 for Contreras, which I think is low, 133 for Donovan, 137 for Nootbaar, 130 for Burleson, 129 for Gorman. Like, there's a lot of guys that have variance here, right? And that's part of the reason why we want to see the Cardinal young bats this year. It's like, is Gorman the 80 WRC plus guy? Is he the 110 or is he the 130? Nootbaar, can he stay on the field? And if so, is he a 115, 120, 130? Donovan, 115, 120, 130. Burleson, 130, 120, 110. Like, there's a lot of variance here, and so there's a world with this Cardinal lineup. Remember how optimistic I was last year about it? Like, it's not for nothing. And even Jordan Walker's 80th percentile outcome. Actually, it's dang, that's really low this year. They have it lower than his 50th percentile outcome last year. His 80th percentile outcome this year is a 118, which is kind of wild to me. But I think Walker could be over 120 in the best case scenario for him. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of bats to potentially like here, and I'm really intrigued to see. And I mean, I'm sure some of them aren't going to perform, but I also think some of them are going to finally take the step forward. And then the nice thing is, then you go into 2026, and it's like, okay, we know that Nootbaar, Donovan, and Walker are our guys and win, but then like Gorman and Burleson and Scott, it's like we know they aren't. Like, I'm just throwing out examples. Like, that'll be a really helpful world as opposed to this year and last year where it's like you have so many different guys that you're not totally sure who's the one and who's not. I think that'll be really helpful to see, and hopefully they do have the unarmed too. Hopefully we get to see a lot of them pitch so we kind of know what they have in them.
Kareem, one of our mods, is spewing some fire in the chat. I don't know if we can make you a mod for much longer. That's crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens with some of these guys. Like, I'm sure the Cardinals are probably one of the teams this year that's going to have the most variance with some of these projections. Like, there's going to be guys that hopefully take off, and there's going to be guys that are just not. That don't perform, and that's totally fine. And I hope that Walker and Gorman live up to what they can be, and if they do, this team might make the playoffs, right? Like, is that crazy to say? Is it bad that I'm saying that? It's January 30th, man. I just want to.
Okay, you're talking about 80th percentile projection for this team, though. I think you're right. The 80th percentile projection for this team is they're a playoff team because their pitching can be average or slightly above average, and they have the potential to have a pretty darn good lineup, not a top lineup, but like 12th, 11th, 10th in baseball, and a good bullpen. And that, with the expanded playoff, can get you in. 20th percentile outcome, you're a 75, 79 win team, 78 win team, and then
You're planning another draft stream with Kareem because we're going to have another top pick. Actually, we won't.
We won't. Yeah, highest they can pick is 11th or 10th, I believe. But then like a 15th or 50th percentile outcome, I think is kind of similar to last year, where they're 80, 82 wins. Like, I think people are kind of underrating. I'm not trying to say how good they'll be because no one's going to be like, oh, an 82 win Cardinal team. That team was great. But like, they could be an average team next year, which, and again, I'm not trying to defend as an exciting proposition. But again, if these young bats play, like, this lineup was the young bats last year, basically. They just didn't perform. And Goldie didn't perform. And Nato didn't perform. Like, if they do, this lineup, imagine, like, they won 83 games with an awful lineup that could not score when runners in scoring position. I know that they won a lot of close games.
I think
so,
they
like,
got lucky. Like, there's the
they
Padres.
did get lucky in some ways, but they were so bad in other areas that it's like, okay, if you just become average in those, then it kind of bounces out the luck a little bit, which is like, say, they could probably be an 82 win team again. But we'll see.
Do you remember that? This is completely unrelated, but do you remember that post this morning with like one-sided hitter-pitcher matchups?
Oh, gosh.
There's another one that just dropped with the opposite of that, and Paul Goldschmidt is 15 for 28 with 7 home runs against Tim Lincecum. So we just need to bring him back. And then
like Tim Lincecum, and then, well, Goldie's a
how many of those at bats were with how many of those 15 hits came with runners in the scoring position? I wonder. Probably like 1.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyways, we appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Again, those are kind of our thoughts. Again, this chat was super fun. So really appreciate that tonight, everyone popping in. Again, I know we try to interact with the questions and comments as we go through. We don't always get to them. Again, you can join our Discord by becoming a channel member for $1 a month, and that's a great place for us to chat. It's going to get more active as the season starts. We'd love to hear you like and subscribe if you like this content. And want to continue to subscribe to the podcast and see more episodes, but also comment later. We try to get to some of the comments too and respond to what you guys got going on. But I think we're really excited to see what happens this year, right? There's just so many different things to know what's going to happen, and who knows? But I'm just really intrigued by this team. For as boring as the offseason's been, like, especially the lineup, like, I want to see Gorman, I want to see Walker, I want to see Donovan, I want to see Nootbaar, I want to see Wynn, I want to see these guys and see what they do. But we'll be back on Sunday, which we're excited about as always. But yeah, like and subscribe, helps channel a ton. Check out 314 Sports Cards Collectibles. Use our code CARDS over on Underdog if you want to get into some fantasy sports. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Josh.